Hey guys, K17 here. Today it's going to be a bit of a different video focused on game mechanics rather than a build guide. Specifically, I want to talk about how to maximize your chaos damage in an attack-based build. To start, here is an example of my Acknowledgement build early in this league, clocking in around 20 million damage on Arbiter from a single snipe burst. Also, please ignore the noob gameplay of me standing in front of his fire beam. I don't know why I was doing that. Note two things about this 20 million number is that number one, this is not a critical hit, nor is this a crit build to start with. I tested this damage a few times to ensure the consistency. A second thing is that out of this 20 million damage, more than 90% of this is of the chaos damage type. So there are obviously many moving gears and pieces to boost its damage up to around the 20 million ballpark. But I do feel that there are three key pointers worth talking about in this video, as well as it being possibly useful for you for any kind of chaos damage-based attack build that you might want to put together yourself. Number one, as of 0.4, Original Sin is crucial for chaos damage scaling, particularly for an attack skill archetype. We'll talk about why later as we take a more detailed look on how damage conversion and calculation works in POE2. Number two, Wither as a chaos debuff mechanic is actually busted, and I would argue a little bit underrated. With just a very reasonable or moderate amount of investment, this lets you scale up to 70% of enemy taken increased damage modifier. For reference, the premium shock debuff that everyone runs in their build for damage scaling is of the same modifier type, and it only goes up to 20% by default. Number three, chaos damage type is in a unique position, in this league at least, to take advantage of elemental ailment stacking by ways of Breach Lore support gem. This in turn unlocks access for further busted damage modifier scaling from things like Yoke of Suffering unique. Jumping into topic number one, let's start with Original Sin. Original Sin is a unique amethyst ring that gives the unique affix 100% of elemental damage converted to chaos damage. On the surface, this does not look as strong. So why is this so critical? Well, to explain that, I've taken the liberty to make a simplified flowchart of how damage calculation works in POE2 to explain. What you're looking at here is two different scenarios of damage calculation, Scenario A and Scenario B. For both scenarios, all of the attack modifiers, weapon flat assumptions, and conversions are all the same, with the exception that Scenario A runs Original Sin and Scenario B does not. So what's the takeaway of the comparison here? The takeaway is that in Scenario A, when you are running Original Sin, more than 90% of your damage is going to end up being the type being Chaos. Whereas in Scenario B, your damage is actually split roughly 50-50 between Cold and Chaos. Now you might ask, why does this still matter? Because if you add up all the different damage types in Scenario B, it adds up to be the same amount as that of Scenario A, which is correct. But in the event of Scenario A, because you have such high concentration of chaos damage at the end of the calculation, it's very easy for you to pick what kind of curse setup as well as debuff setup to run. Additionally, Despair as a curse and Wither as a debuff only applies to the chaos damage portion of your overall damage. So the effectiveness, quote unquote, of these two modifiers are close to 100% because all of your damage are chaos to begin with. Versus if you look at Scenario B, when you have a 50-50 split roughly between your cold damage and your chaos damage, you run into kind of a question of whether you want to run debuff setup for LE damage or you want to run debuff setup for chaos. And if you really try to do both, you're going to run into a lot of inefficiencies in the build because for LE the debuff, it's not only just your curse, you also have exposure and resistance penetration, while on the chaos side you also have Wither, and not to mention that you by default can only stack one curse on the enemy at any point in time. And more importantly, in the event of Scenario B, no matter which route you decide to go in terms of debuff, your debuff setup is only going to apply to 50% of your damage, which effectively halves the effectiveness of your debuff setup, whichever one you decide to go. So if I want to dive in a little bit deeper into this, I guess it might not be news that concentrating your damage type is very important. But what is so different about chaos-based attack build that necessitates the use of Original Sin, whereas other kind of damage types do not? And the reason is here in the base damage. Right now, as of 0.4, there's very little to no base damage source or flat sources of chaos damage, with the exception of like a rune or two, or maybe with the exception of 1 to 2 bow type. That's it. So that being said, which means that if you look at the damage calculation, which is broken into 3 parts, base damage, damage conversion, and damage modifiers, as of base damage side, it's very hard for you to stack chaos damage if you want to do a chaos damage focused build. So what do people generally do? People generally use gain damage as extra chaos, which is this starred step in the damage conversion to stack chaos damage. This is a perfectly fine way to get chaos damage, and if you get a lot of base damage of some other type, it's very reasonable for you to get pretty high chaos damage as well. The issue here is just efficiency. Gain as extra chaos, that's kind of things like your Purple Flame from Acolyte Chayula, your Unholy Might from Lich, as well as Kurgle's Leech support gem, etc., etc. You can build it up to 100%, 200%, or even, let's say, in the extreme case, you have 300% of gain damage as extra chaos. First of all of that is based off of your base damage, before any of the modifiers kicks in, right? Second of all, even in the event of 300%, you still have 25% of your total damage that is of the non-chaos type. So going back into kind of the debuff discussion that we had, all of the Despair and the Wither stuff that you're going to run will have its effectiveness cut by 25% in the event that you stack up 300% of gain as extra chaos, which is still pretty inefficient, right? Compared to if we run Original Sin, I can just stack LE damage, LE flat instead, and all of this gets converted to chaos, and voila, my debuff efficacy is close to 100%, again, just because of all my damage is of the chaos damage type. And also 2 side notes that I see questions on YouTube comments or Reddit. When you're running Original Sin, the conversion takes place before any of the modifier calculation comes in, which means do not take on the tree anything that says elemental damage increase, because elemental damage increase gets applied here. At this point, you have no elemental damage because it's all chaos from the Original Sin conversion. And second thing is, when you concentrate so much damage on chaos, you can actually take things on the tree like Event Horizon, Spedification, things that just increases chaos damage and get the full effect of it, right? The minor nodes are around 7%, and Event Horizon is about 50% or something like that. When you take that, you get the full effect, versus if you come into scenario B and if you try to take the same kind of nodes on the passive tree, even something as powerful as Event Horizon, like 50% increased chaos damage, effectively you're only getting about a 25% increase, because again, half of your damage is of the non-chaos type. So hopefully that was helpful in communicating why Original Sin is so important in terms of concentrating on damage type, and we can jump into topic number 2, which is talking about Wither specifically. So as a start, what exactly is Withered? Withered is a debuff you can inflict on your enemy, and they can inflict on you as well, which generally applies 5% increased chaos damage taken and can be inflicted up to 10 times. So in the maximum stack scenario, your enemy is taking 50% increase chaos damage taken. So a few things to break down here on this Wither mechanic. Number 1, what does it mean when it says increased chaos damage taken? To answer that, let's jump back into our flowchart and we can just kind of, focus on scenario 8 for now. I cleared all the annotations, but again, keeping in mind the idea of how damage is calculated in POE2, the system first calculates base damage, and then it goes through all of the damage conversion, and finally, it goes to the damage modifiers. Let's focus on the damage modifier. There are 3 general types of modifiers. There are increase, decrease modifiers, there are more, less modifiers, and there are enemies take increase damage modifiers. Increase and decrease generally comes from things on the tree. with, sometimes prefixes on the weapon. More or less generally comes from skill gems, but there are, again, exceptions. And number 3, enemies taken as increased damage, that's generally your premium modifier, because every step as the damage goes, it's multiplicative with regard to the previous step. So Wither is this premium modifier step here. And again, when it goes to 50% increase as enemies taken for chaos damage, what that means is that you can have all of your calculation done all the way right up and after the more or less increase, whatever step. And let's say you get a raw damage of 1,000, chaos type, concentrated because it's, you're using original sin, for example. All of a sudden, you're dealing 1,500 damage instead of 1,000. That is an insane increase if you look at the absolute number. And again, this class of modifier is in the same class as Shock, which is why it's such a premium debuff. I think the trick or kind of the issue with Wither is that it only applies to Chaos, and I see some folks not running Original Sin with a Chaos attack build, which then effectively reduces the efficacy of your Wither debuff as we talked about before. So maybe that's why Wither was not looked at as particularly as it should be, because it's actually a very powerful debuff. So that's kind of the mechanics and how Wither works. So before we move on to the next topic, I also wanted to quickly talk about how to maximize your Wither stacking. If you check the Arbiter clip that I showed earlier in the video, I was able to get up to 70%, which is actually higher than your default full stacking of 50%. How we achieve that is by a moderate amount of investment in a few different places. First thing first is you should always start with the Withering Presence Spirit Gem. This essentially lets you stack Wither on the enemy as long as they're in your presence. One stack added gets every 1.42 seconds, and each Wither duration is 7 seconds. By this gem alone, you can take 7 divided by 1.42, that's roughly 5 to 6 stack maximum. This is not going to let you reach up to 50% just because of the fact that each Wither stack has a duration before it expires. So the other way to maximize this is by running Prolonged Duration, which increase your duration from 7 seconds to something a little bit longer, such as 9 seconds, 9.4. So if you take that and you divide it by 1.42, now you're closer to 7 to 8 stack, which is about 35%. So even at this point, you're still not going to be able to max out your 50% Wither magnitude. The other thing then is a must-have to max out your Wither stack is then Withering Touch. This allows you also to inflict additional Wither stacks on the enemy as long as you're hitting them. It does come with the downside of less damage, as well as the fact that the Wither via this stack is not going to last as long. But the upside is that this actually allows you to inflict multiple stacks of Wither per hit if you are hitting hard enough. And the fact that you can add this to an attack that hits multiple times or attack very quickly essentially lets you stack up Wither very effectively when combined with Withering Presence. So these 3 things, Withering Presence, Prolonged Duration, as well as Wither Touch on a skill that hits pretty frequently, will definitely let you hit to the ceiling of 50% of the Wither debuff. So then to go beyond that, to get to 70%, what you also need to invest into is these 3 particular nodes here on the upper right corner of the tree: Withered Effect, as well as Wither Away. Combined together, this gives you about a 40% increase in Wither magnitude, which translates that every stack instead of 5%, you're getting 7%, which then stacking 10 times then lets you have 70% of increased damage taken by the enemy, as long as your damage is of the Chaos type. So this is what we've been able to do to get to 70% on the Arbiter. And if I zoom out a little bit and put Shock back into the picture, because this modifier again is the same class as Shock, if you run your default Shock with an overcharge support like I do here, for example, Hand of Chayula, we shock with Freezing Mark and Charge Mark and Overcharge. Overcharge increases the magnitude of your shock by 50%. Your base is 20% shock, so that turns into 30%. 30% plus 70% from the Withering is 100%. What that really means then, again, is that if you look at your damage and what that value is after your increase decrease more or less scaling, whatever that value is, double it. So that's how insane this modifier essentially becomes, especially as you get into late game when you're upgrading your weapons, when you're taking more increase nodes on the tree, or you're getting more modifiers on the support gems and stuff like that. If you have about 1 million damage, it turns into 2, 2 turns into 4, 4 turns into 8, etc., etc. So this is essentially a very powerful kit in terms of maximizing your damage. So now we get to the third part of the video, which is how can we further scale our chaos damage into the endgame? And I think one viable way to do so, at least again as of 0.4, is by stacking elemental ailments and running Yoke of Suffering as a unique. So 2 reasons for this. Let's first take a look at what Yoke of Suffering is. Yoke of Suffering is a unique Bloodstone amulet, so it does take up your amulet slot, with this key unique affix that says enemies take 15 to 20% increased damage for each elemental ailment type among your ailments on them. It's kind of worded a little strange, but what this suggests is actually this type of damage modifier is in the same premium class as Wither and Shock. So this will have the most drastic impact of increasing your damage if you can scale it properly. On paper, if you roll a max of 20%, and you stack all 5 elemental ailments, which by the way are Ignite, Freeze, Shock, Chill, and Electrocute, you get another 100% just like that. At this point, a question might arise, which is, wait a minute, Yoke of Suffering is taking up an amulet slot. Generally for amulet, you want to look for a rare one with +3 to skill, as well as a variety of T1 crit chance or crit damage multipliers. So if we're replacing this slot with a Yoke of Suffering, how many elemental ailments do I need to stack to actually surpass the damage scaling I'd get otherwise from said rare amulet? That's a great question, and this is another flowchart to answer that question. What you're looking at here is 2 scenarios of damage calculation from base, conversion, all the way down to damage modifier. We have another scenario, let's call this C, and call this D. Scenario C and D will have the same flat damages, increase, decrease, as well as more and less. The only 2 differences is the skill gem multiplier section, as well as the Yoke of Suffering modifiers. In the case of C, we have a level 20 Flicker Strike with 327% skill gem multiplier. As the numbers work down through the calculation, it hits the Yoke of Suffering modifier step, and I'm assuming either 2 stack or 3 stack of elemental ailment stacking, which I think is a bit more reasonable to assume to be able to do in a realistic scenario. In this case, your final damage output is either about 1.5 all the way up to about 1.7, close to 1.8. Alternatively, if I look at scenario D with the same flat damage, and now this time I'm at a level 23 Flicker Strike, my multiplier goes up to about 408%. When this set of number goes through the same steps of calculation all the way down here, it does not have the Yoke of Suffering modifier, so it's a 1.0 multiplication. The final damage is only around 1300, if not close to 1400. One other thing at this point we can also take into account is assuming levels of T1 modifier for crit chance and crit damage. Roughly speaking, on average, those 2 things add together give you another 15 to 20% of damage output increase. When you slap that multiplier back into this number right here, you roughly get about a 1.5 number. Comparing this back to here, it's pretty obvious that a pretty good rare amulet with +3 and T1 crit is on parity with Yoke of Suffering when you're stacking 2 elemental ailments. And when you're stacking 3 and above, Yoke of Suffering outskills the damage you will get from the amulet slot drastically. So at this point, I've hopefully convinced you that Yoke of Suffering is a very good item for endgame damage scaling. And you might now be asking, so Kenny, how exactly do you scale elemental ailment with chaos? So that's what we're going to talk about now, and on the flowchart here is my example of the Acolyte of Chayula build that you saw in the Uber Arbiter footage. To make this work, you will need 3 key lineage support gems, Pulse Stillness, Zoph's Pyre, and Etch's Radiance. They're kind of expensive, so just kind of FYI if you want to try something similar. Long story short, these support gems enable your chaos damage to contribute to Freeze, Ignite, and Shock respectively. And unfortunately, one thing is you cannot slot all 3 of them into the same skill or efficiency, otherwise that'd just be a little bit too busted, I think. So we do need to pick 3 different skills to slot those 3 different gems in to stack 3 out of the 4 elemental ailments that we can do, which again is Freeze, Ignite, and Shock. So for my build, I'm doing Whirling Assault as my default attack, so Freeze goes into that, which is Total Stillness, so we have this done. As I'm doing this, I'm building up Combo, as well as building up Freeze. For Freeze, once I've frozen the enemy and I've shattered them, I have Hero Device for further damage, and this is where I'm socking in Esh's Radiance. So the chaos damage from the Hero Device will be shocking nearby enemies as I shatter them. In parallel, Whirling Assault also lets me build Combo, which then leads me into my skill here, Tempest Spell, which is a combo spender. I support this skill with Ailment Chime, which gives me power charge every time I spend combo. And this then lets me build into Charged Staff. And I have essentially linked Charged Staff with Zoph's Pyre. So every now and then I will be clicking the Tempest Spell and the Charged Staff button. So while Charged Staff is up, I will essentially have automation of Ignite buildup, Freeze buildup, as well as Hero Device Shock buildup. And this is more than sufficient for mapping scenarios. For bossing scenario, I did manage to cram a 4th ailment in, which is Chill buildup. For Chill buildup, it's going to be trickier because we don't have a Breach Lore support gem that lets Chaos contribute to Chill. And at first glance, you might just kind of take a look at the freeze here and say that, hey, why don't I run something like Frozen Nexus or whatever that support gem is called, which lets you generate chill ground when you freeze something. You can, but the issue is if you do it that way, the chill ground generated will always refer back to your Whirling Assault to check the amount of cold damage that your skill does. And that essentially dictates the magnitude of the chill for the enemy as they step onto the chilled ground. Which means that if you have Original Sin and everything is chaos and that's what's leading to freeze, you can generate visually the chill ground, but it's literally going to have 0 magnitude in terms of chill because you actually don't have cold damage tied to Whirling Assault. So it's really just for cosmetic and nothing's ever going to get chilled. So for you to do chill buildup, you actually need cold damage somewhere. So how do we get that? Especially when we are running Original Sin that already converts all the cold into chaos. So if you recall my flowchart earlier in the video, there is a sequence in which how damage is calculated and converted. And if you'll note, the conversion for Original Sin happens before any application of gain damage as extra, which on paper actually means that if you stack enough gain damage as extra cold, you will still have reasonable amount of cold damage tied to your skill, even with Original Sin equipped. And FYI, this is actually how the Hero Device with Armor Explosion tech work when people keep telling you to take a weapon that has gain damage as extra for physical. So fizz damage goes into essentially Hero Device, even though all of the Hero Device damage is cold in nature, which then lets you proc Armor Explosion and you chain explosions that way. It's the same exact mechanism in terms of how that works, right? So coming back to chill buildup, we just take a bunch of gain damage as extra cold essentially. So now, before you start going shopping and trying to find Heart of the Well with gain extra damage as cold, there's something a lot easier: Embitter. This support gem essentially just says that all your sources of gain damage is extra, whatever type of damage, those damage are now cold damage for the particular skill that this has been slotted into. This one combined with Cold Attunement, which just gives you straight up another 25% of extra as cold, allow you to have reasonable cold damage tied to Tempest Spell. So note, you have a lot of cold sources from gain damage as extra, but you still do not have any in the passive tree, for example, increased cold damage, right? Or at least in my build, I've taken all of the notes for chaos damage. So your damage for cold is not going to be insane, right? Because you don't have any increased sources essentially. But it's going to be reasonable enough for you to be chilling bosses consistently, as you can see in the Uber Arbiter tooltip. And that is sufficient enough to count chill as the 4th ailment. So zooming back out a little bit, our 3 Breach Lore gems lets us stack Freeze, Ignite, Shock and our embittered tech essentially allows us to stack chill. So that is a total of 4 elemental ailments. You take a Yoke of Suffering with a max roll of 20%, that's an 80% multiplier. Take that 80%, add Wither of 70% to it, add Shock of 30% or a little bit above, take some shock magnitude. You are close to 200% in terms of extra damage taken. So if your build, up until the calculation step of more or less, is outputting about 1 million, you're now outputting about 2.8 million. Or if your build is outputting about 3 million, you're now outputting about 9 million or 8 something, 8.5 or whatever, right? So just the things that I'm talking about here is insane for damage scaling. So that about wraps up everything I want to say in terms of maximizing chaos damage for an attack-based build, which again is looking into Original Sin, looking into Wither, as well as checking out elemental ailment stacking by ways of chaos if you do have the Breach Lore gems that are laying around or the divines laying around. Overall, I hope you've taken something useful out of this video for this league as well as future league build optimization. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or things that you found that I said here that's kind of inaccurate, feel free to comment down below, and I'm happy to kind of rectify or correct or clarify or what have you. So yeah, until next time, cheers.